Alright, so today I want to do something a little bit different. I want to do a question and answer session based on some of the questions and comments that were posted in some of my previous live streams. I used to do some live streams, and as a matter of fact, I used to drive all the way to the library down the mountain. About halfway down the mountain, I'd drive down there and use their internet connection because my internet here at the house is super slow. I don't think I could do a live stream here. And it was kind of interesting. I was actually pulling up some of those old live streams and looking at the chats, like the chat replay, and there's a whole bunch of stuff that I missed. A lot of questions and a lot of comments, which is pretty interesting. I haven't actually gone through all those comments, and I went through all the comments and I pretty much printed out like 32 of the kind of the top comments that I don't think I answered on the live stream. So I printed them out here. I thought it'd be kind of interesting just to kind of go through all 32 questions and answer them here kind of on a video where I could slowly upload it. It takes forever to upload videos on my really slow connection. Essentially what I do is I upload at night, so it pretty much uploads all night, and then I schedule them to post in the morning. So it's kind of crazy. I don't know if I could ever do a live stream again unless I drive back down to the library. And I was actually doing live streams in my car. It was kind of cringy, not really very good camera or anything like that, but it was always fun doing the live stream. And doing the live stream, it was like the comments would go by so fast. I really couldn't see most of the comments, and sometimes people would spam a little bit, which makes things worse because they go so fast I just could not see them. And I actually found out in that live stream I could kind of go back in the history of the chat and kind of go back and answer some questions. So what I want to do is I want to just kind of go through these 32 questions and see if answer some questions that you asked quite a long time ago that I really haven't answered. So here we go. Number one, have you ever had a ball python get so mad that it moves its tail like a rattlesnake? And that's interesting. I've never really had it happen with the ball python, but I have had it happen with some king snakes. I had some of those black and white banded, it was a California king snake, the desert phase, and those really wagged their tail really fast like a rattlesnake. It was kind of wild, but I've never had a ball python do it. That was a good question. Number two, do you sell rodents to the public? No, I actually don't. For a while, I was actually selling rodents to one of my local reptile stores, and now I just put them in the freezer. It's kind of interesting now. I mainly euthanize them and put them in the freezer, and I feed mainly my own frozen thawed instead of using live or freshly killed. So it's kind of works out a little bit better where I can balance the flow of rodents. It gets to the point where, do I really want to breed them? Is it worth actually breeding them, or should I just buy frozen thawed? But every now and then you have the ones that only eat live, and those are the ones that I pretty much you keep the rodents going for just those. So that was a good question. Number three. All right. Quick question. If you could go back in time, would you still jump into ball python breeding? And yes, I definitely would. As a matter of fact, I would probably get into ball python breeding a lot earlier than I did. I felt like I kind of missed the boat. I got into it about 5 years ago, and I felt like I was into it so late. I wish I could have gotten into it maybe 5 or 10 years earlier to hit some of the initial craze of the ball python industry. And if the longer you're into it, the more advanced your collection becomes, because it's a really long game getting into ball pythons. That was a good question. All right, number four. Do you do venomous? No. As a matter of fact, I was kind of looking at the king cobras. I was really interested in the king cobras, and then I found out that the king cobras eat ball pythons, and I decided I don't want a snake that eats other snake, and that's probably the only one. Although the mangroves are kind of interesting. I think they're a rear-fanged venomous, so technically not that dangerous compared to all the venomous. But I probably won't do any venomous. I'll stick with ball pythons because I get bit quite a bit, and I definitely don't want to risk my life over some snakes. All right, so number five, let's see. Why does my female that is gravid try to run out of the tub when I open it? And that is a good question. It's kind of interesting. I actually have one snake in my entire collection, and that is my pastel spider desert ghost female, that every time I open the tub, that thing comes flying out for whatever reason. It's the only snake that, you know, it's kind of weird because I actually bred that and I thought it was gravid, and then I think it reabsorbed the eggs, and now it just seems like it wants to jump out of the tub every time I open the tub, and it still is off of food, which is kind of crazy. But I don't know why ball pythons do it. It's kind of interesting. It's pretty rare, I'd say that. All right, number 6, do you think coconut fiber is a good substrate for ball python? I've actually used some coconut husk. You can get a little bit cheaper if it has a lot of fiber in it. And the problem with the fiber, it's like strands instead of the chunks. And I found the fiber, it works pretty good, but the problem is it doesn't absorb a lot of humidity, and it really doesn't absorb a lot of smell. So I'd say the fiber maybe work good if you're actually in a really humid climate where you don't have to worry about humidity, but I'd say for here in the Colorado climate, I really need to have a lot of humidity in the coconut husk chips, like the chunks, instead of the fiber. It doesn't really work very good in my climate. All right, number 7, what other genes are you trying to add to bamboo? That's a good question. One of the things I thought about doing maybe this year, this is a bamboo around my neck. This is Bobby, my 7-year-old male bamboo ball python. I'm thinking about maybe breeding this to a spider. I actually have a jungle woma spider female that is up for sale, and if it doesn't sell, it's coming up to the breeding season here in a couple weeks. I'm thinking about breeding Bobby or one of my bamboos to that jungle woma spider. As a matter of fact, I may take it down and just breed it, and then after it breeds, maybe sell it next year. I really don't want to breed a whole bunch of spiders because I don't think there's a huge market for it. But let me tell you, the bamboo spiders are really awesome with a really reduced pattern. Pretty awesome. All right, so number 8, from start pairing to finish egg laying, what is the time frame? So from the time frame when you pair them up to the time they lay eggs, I'd say probably the latest time is about 10 months. It's kind of crazy because you have pretty much 10 months to when they lay eggs, and then you have another 2 months to get a bunch of rats into them before you start the next breeding season, which is always a challenge. And if they lay a little bit later and they stop eating, go off of food, I usually give them the following year off. It can be almost like a 12-month cycle. You really don't want to get behind because then you pretty much have to give them a year off to catch up. All right, so number 9, we gotta go through these pretty quick. So let's see, why do my females go from cool seeking to a perfect coil and then the hot side and then cool seeking again? And that is kind of the process and the progression of females when they're building eggs. A lot of times they'll start on the hot side, and then when they build the eggs, they'll go and bowl wrap on the cool side, and then usually before they lay eggs, they'll go back to the hot side and get ready for the, you know, to develop the final developing of the eggs so they can lay the eggs. And it's always kind of interesting. They kind of go back and forth. It's pretty much normal for ball python females. All right, so number 10, let's see. What are your views on snake trades versus sales? And that's a good question. As a matter of fact, I really hesitate to bring any new snakes into my collection because I don't want to risk any mites. That's what really scares me. I have so many snakes in here. I definitely don't want to bring anything into my collection. So I would prefer to do all sales and breed everything here in-house versus trade and bringing snakes in. The only reason I'd trade is if I really wanted a gene and I couldn't afford it and I had to trade with, you know, snakes. Usually what I do is I sell a whole bunch of hatchlings and then save up and then buy something really high end. That's pretty much what I've been doing. Buy something like $1,000 or $1,500, and then I quarantine it like 2 floors up in a completely separate level of the house. And still, even then, I'm still kind of freaked out about bringing mites into the house. So definitely rather sell than trade or even bring a new snake into the house. All right, number 11, let's see. What do you do when you have an overflow of rats? I'm about to explode in the breeding with several pregnant females, and that is a good question. You kind of have to balance your flow of rats so you don't get too many. Most pet stores will actually buy your overflow, and if you have a really big freezer, as a matter of fact, you can actually buy like a big freezer, and then I euthanize with CO2 and then fill the freezer, and then kind of, you know, once your freezer's full, you can pretty much separate your males from your females and take a break from breeding and just use what you have in the freezer. All right, number 12, is it possible to own only one ball python? Definitely not. Once you buy one ball python, you definitely need a second one and a third one. You just can't own one. It's kind of crazy. All right, Bobby's going to help me read here. Let's see. How do you get your female mice not to eat their babies? And that is a very good question. So I found that mice, usually when you start breeding mice, essentially what happens is the first litter, usually the females will eat the first or second litter, and you just have to give them a chance to eventually, figure it out. And usually the third litters and onwards, they kind of figure out that, they're not supposed to. It's kind of interesting. Once they raise one litter, they'll never ever eat a baby again. It's like they really don't know what they are. They think they're food sometimes, and it seems like it's only a problem with mice and not really with rats. So I'd say just have patience and give them some time. All right, let's see. Number 14. Have you ever added up your total investment in snakes? As a matter of fact, I haven't. I know I actually added up my investment in racks, and I think I have maybe $20,000 in racks, and I probably have somewhere close to that in snakes. But let me tell you, once you get to the point where you're breeding snakes, it definitely pays off in the long run. And pretty much all these racks, like the high-end ARS racks, they have a really high resale value. So if I ever got out of ball pythons, which I don't think I ever would, I could pretty much recoup almost all my money from these racks. They're in really high demand and they really hold their value. All right, number 15. Well, we're only halfway through. We gotta go through this a little bit faster. Let's see. How are you getting along with your fridge incubator? I actually made an incubator out of a beverage cooler, and it's been working fantastic. I've been using that for about, the last 3 years, and I've hatched, hundreds of eggs out of there. Works really good. No problems at all with that. What's your favorite gene of ball python? I'd say right now, probably my favorite 2 genes is the bamboo, of course, Bobby here around my neck. That's my number 1 favorite, I'd say, and probably number 2 is Desert Ghost. I'm really expanding both in the bamboos and the Desert Ghost. Number 17, let's see, my ball python's over a year old and is very small. Do you know why? I am very concerned. And that's kind of interesting because ball pythons pretty much grow according to how much you feed them. So the more you feed a ball python, the faster it'll grow and the bigger it will get. So if you actually have a really small ball python, and especially like a hatchling, if you fed that thing like every 4 days, every 3 or 4 days, for the first month or so, it grows really super fast. And I've actually seen some people, well, they'll feed a hatchling like once a month and it grows super slow. And after a year, it's only had like 12 meals. Let me tell you, that is way too slow. I've actually seen some year-old ball pythons that are really super small. So I'd say, it really depends on the age of the ball python. You probably want to feed at least once a week if you're feeding a ball python. All right, number 18. Let's see. Do you know if people selling hets are telling the truth? And that is a very good question. I've actually heard of people trying to scam the system, selling hets or, snakes that sometimes you can say, hey, this is a het sunset or something and get really high dollar for it. But, a few years later down the road, when people try to breed it and they figure out they're scammed, you pretty much ruined your name. It might work in the short term trying to scam people, but let me tell you, the ball python industry is really small. And once they learn you're scamming people, they'll pretty much, no one will actually buy those snakes from you. I'd say it doesn't really happen that much because keep in mind the ball python game is a really long game and usually people know you and you have to kind of build a reputation, and people scamming, I'd say there's not a lot of people actually scamming in the ball python industry. And it's always good to really know your breeder too if you can, or kind of ask around to see how long people have been breeding ball pythons. So let's see, number 19, have you gotten bitten yet this year? And that is a good question. And the question is, have I got bitten yet this week? Usually I'd say at least every month I get bit. Some days I'll get bit like 20 times. And it's usually from crazy hatchlings. And it really depends. I'd say maybe the last time I got bit, it was maybe 2 weeks ago. I'd say yes, I pretty much get bit quite a bit. And it's usually just kind of a little nip. It's not really that bad. I've only ever ever had one ball python grab me and wrap around to where, you know, it really just drew blood and I was bleeding all over the place. But, you know, that's only once that's ever happened. Usually it's just like a little pinprick of a bite that usually doesn't really hurt that much. It kind of scares you more than anything. All right, Bobby's gonna help me read on this one again. All right, let's see. Number 20, how many blocks of cocoa bedding come on a pallet? I actually buy pallets of the cocoa block from Pro Coco. I think it's about 100 or 110 blocks, and it comes to a little over $1,000, I think, for a whole pallet after you pay the delivery and everything, which is it's a really good deal if you can actually afford it. And I go through a lot of coconut husk for the bedding for my snakes. All right, number 21, do snakes always coil the same direction, clockwise or counterclockwise? That's an interesting question. I've never actually looked at my ball pythons. After I looked at the question, I was like, I'm gonna start looking at my snakes to see if they're coiling clockwise or counterclockwise. Number 22, have you ever been bitten on the face? Thankfully, no, I have never been bitten on the face. Kind of my biggest fear is to get bit on the face by like a big retic. That's why I'm always trying to keep them away from my face. I do not want face damage from a reticulated python. Number 23, I can't get my baby ball pythons to eat. What can I do? If they're babies, you can actually try live mouse hoppers or live mice. Usually that is the key to getting babies to eat. And what I like to do as a breeder is I like to kind of go through that transition, feed them live mice myself and get them on the rats, like the frozen thawed rats, before I sell them, so people don't have to struggle with trying to feed live mice to baby ball pythons. Sometimes people are really against feeding live, which can be problematic. Number 24. Let's see. How many snakes do you need? How many snakes do you end up needing to wholesale as opposed to selling full price? And that is a good question. So for selling wholesale, it's kind of interesting. You can actually take your ball pythons and walk into any reptile store, usually, and they will pay you pretty much, I'd say pretty much probably half price as far as the market value. And sometimes they'll actually trade you like the full price, they'll give you store credit. And I found a lot of pet stores, they pretty much buy everything at half price and double it. But keep in mind, they have an incredible amount of overhead with the rent and the heating and the lighting and paying employees and everything. So I'd say that's pretty much normal to expect. You know, I'd say you could probably walk in with one ball python or a whole handful and still get the wholesale price from a reptile store. All right, let's see. Number 25, let's see, are you looking to expanding to breeding retics full-time along with ball pythons? And I would say definitely not. I just have my 2 reticulated pythons. What I might actually do is if they actually finally breed, I actually have just a male and a female. One is a super dwarf, the other one is a Jampea dwarf. If I can actually get them to breed, what I might do is I might swap out my male for a different type of male so I can kind of change up the genetics. But let me tell you, with the big enclosures and the fast growth rate, you know, 2 retics is pretty much all I can handle. Number 26, how long have you been breeding? I have been breeding for, well, I keep saying 5 years, but I think it's almost 6 years now, which is, it's not really that long of a time when you're in ball pythons. It usually takes a couple years, 2 to 3 years, just to get started because your females take that long to mature. All right, number 27, where did you get your African soft fur rats? And let me tell you, African soft furs are actually pretty hard to find. They're actually listed on the Lacey Act and illegal to transport across state lines. So it's kind of hard to get them. And I actually got mine, well, the last time I got them, it's kind of a disaster. I actually got them from, you have to call around to like reptile stores or pet stores. And I found that they breed really super slow and they grow slow too. It takes forever to reproduce, and I pretty much gave up on my African soft furs and just went with the regular rats and mice. All right, number 28, let's see. What's the morph that you like that you see the least of available, like the hidden gem in ball python? So I'd say probably what I'd go for, you know, for one of the genes that's not very popular that I really like, that is the tri-stripe, which is a recessive gene. I actually just looked over on Morphmarket, you know, just before I printed this out, and there's only about like a dozen visual tri-stripes for sale over on Morphmarket, and they bring in quite a bit of money. It'd be an interesting exciting project to get into. All right, number 29, do you have a site where you sell your ball pythons? I really don't have a website. I pretty much only sell over on Morphmarket. It's pretty much the only place that I sell. All right, number 30, let's see. Is there a thing as too much humidity for a ball python when it comes to shedding? And I would say no, not really when it comes to shedding, but I'd say you can have too much humidity if you have it really high for too long of a time. You can run into respiratory infections, which I've actually seen some people. I actually used to sell a lot of my rodents to a guy who kind of had a homemade rack, and it seemed like he didn't really have enough ventilation. His humidity was almost like at 100%, and every now and then he'd have a snake with a respiratory infection. I think it was from too high of a humidity. All right, number 31. Hi, Chris. Two of my females seem like they're building, stopped eating, ate like crazy and stopped, then bowl wrapping, laying inverted. Two, however, just started eating again. What are your thoughts on that? And I found pretty much across the board that if I'm actually breeding females and they go off of food and they're doing all the stuff that, you know, that they're supposed to be doing, bowl wrapping and everything, if they go back on food halfway through the season, it's pretty much that they're not gonna lay. Every time I have a female that goes back on food, I'm like, all right, that female is not gonna lay. Usually once they stop eating, you know, they go through the whole routine, you know, they're pretty much, they're either gonna lay or they're gonna start eating, and then it's pretty much a bust until the next year, which isn't a bad thing. As a matter of fact, if they start eating really early, like halfway through the season, a lot of times you can actually, you know, get some more weight on them up to a bigger size for the upcoming year, which is kind of where I'm at. I had a lot of them. This year I had a whole bunch of them that just started eating again, and it was a real bust. But the cool thing is now they're getting really big and they're eating a lot, and I have a few more months to get them into condition coming up to the breeding season. All right, so the last one, number 32, are you still glad you quit your day job? That is a very good question. So yeah, it's as a matter of fact, I don't know how long it's been, maybe 8 or 9 months. I don't think it's been a year yet. I actually quit my day job and went full-time doing YouTube and breeding snakes and all the other stuff that I have going around here. And I'm definitely glad I did it. Let me tell you, it's a lot of work to actually keep up with the YouTube and, you know, come up with creative ideas to try to figure out, you know, what I can actually share with everyone that'll keep people's attention and keep the interest. So it's almost like being, I'd say it's kind of like being an artist. You have to be really creative trying to come up with new topics. It's a little bit different than, you know, working the regular grind. Kind of the weird thing about doing YouTube is it feels like it's almost like a 24/7 job. You're always thinking, you know, every single day, what can I make a video of this time? Because I'm up to, I think I just passed over 900 videos. So you're trying to figure out another topic that I haven't covered over the last couple of years, and that can be a challenge. You're always up against the wall trying to think. And, you know, day job, you know, you clock in at 8, you clock out at 5, and you're done. You don't have to think about anything, and you have the weekends off. And let me tell you, this is I'd say it's a lot more of a grind that you're actually trying to do, but I definitely love it a lot more than working a day job for someone else. So that is pretty much it. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.